Okay, for today, I'm going to be working questions 39 through 42 from our notes, right? 39 through 42. We're going to call this piecewise function. Okay, so when I take a look, right, I see one question. I'm going to give you guys three graphs, three different graphs. There's one, two, three, three different graphs. And I'm going to plot in this graphs for certain sections. So for part of my graph, it's going to be the first graph. Another part is going to be the second graph, and the third part is going to be my third graph. I'm going to connect all three graphs. Okay. Now, one thing I want to emphasize here is the type of graphs that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at about 5 different types of graphs. The first graph, the easy one, is when I only get a number. Okay, so I only get a number. As an example of that is y equals 3. Now those graphs look straight. Another one that we know is when my highest exponent is 1. When my highest exponent is 1. An example is y equals 3x plus 2. Right, that highest exponent is 1. I'm going to either get a line going up or I'm going to get a line going down. Let me write the word or. Right, it's one line going up or one line going down. We learned that back in algebra 1. Now in algebra 2, there's a couple that we learn. Well, so that we're going to learn these a little bit more. So let me give you guys a little introduction of those. When my highest exponent is 2. An example is, let's say y equals, inside the parentheses, let me write x plus 3 all squared plus 5. Now, these are going to be interesting. We're going to call this parabolas, okay? And then this are going to have an U shape. Oops. This graph, when the highest exponent is 2, we're going to have a U shape. It's either going a U shape up and up or a U shape up and down, okay? That's what it's going to look like. Now, the highest point, if the U shape is up and down, the highest point we're going to call that the vertex. If the U shape is up and up, the lowest point. Basically, if it's up and up, the lowest point, or the highest point if it's up and down. This vertex we have to be able to find out. In this equation, my example, my vertex is going to be the coordinates -3, 5. Notice where I got my numbers from. Notice how the 1 from inside of the parentheses, I switched the sign, -3. The number outside of the parentheses, I left it alone, right? +5. Okay, so I'm going to use that equation. Another case we're going to see is absolute values. An example is like y equals absolute value of x plus 3. Another example, this might confuse a few people, is absolute value of x over 2 plus 3, because that is equivalent to 1/2 absolute value of x plus 3. Okay, that's going to confuse you guys. Now, absolute values, they're going to look almost like a parabola, but instead of having a U shape, they have a V shape. It's either open up or open down. The vertex, these also have a vertex, right? In geometry, you guys we talk about angles, we talk about the corner. In this case, my vertex is going to be 0, 3. Okay, where did I get these values from? Look at my absolute value. That looks almost like x minus 0, right? Just an x. That's where I got the 0 value. Kind of like how we did on parabolas. And then look at the number outside. That's where I got the +3. Okay, kind of like we do with parabolas. Now the last one, because I said we're going to be looking at 5 graphs. The last one is when I have a number over x. So I have a fraction and x is at the bottom. Okay, now this graph, and an example, y equals 3 over x plus 2. Now these graphs, the x-axis is very important. Let me call this the x-axis. The x-axis is very important. When x is at the bottom of my fraction, if I have a point on the top, it is above the x-axis, it's gonna look something like this. What the graph wants to do is get closer to the x-axis. It doesn't cross it. If I have a point at the bottom of the x-axis, as you can assume, now if I'm dealing on the left side of my graph, it should look something like this. We're gonna see those later on, but let's take a look. Question number 39. Okay, question number 39. You take a look at the first graph to begin with. That looks like a U shape, okay? And I'm gonna use x plus 1 all squared when x is less than or equal to -1. All right, so I know that looks like a U shape. My vertex is -1 because that's the number inside the parentheses. Remember, gotta switch the sign. And I don't see a number outside of the parentheses, so my vertex is -1, 0. Right. I'm gonna be using when x is less than or equal to -1. I gotta ask myself, okay, I came out with the point. Is the x within the range? Yeah, it is. Okay. I gotta come out. So as a matter of fact, let me plot this point already. -1, 0 is right here. I'm gonna close the circle. Sometimes I might use an open circle. Sometimes I might use a closed circle. Let me come back over here. When the inequality sign, because I'm gonna have inequality signs, when my inequality sign doesn't have the or equal to at the bottom, my circle will be open. If I have a less than or equal to, greater or equal to, notice he has a or equal to at the bottom, my point will be a closed circle. So that's why I said this one right here is a closed circle. Because look at my inequality, has a or equal to part. Now I gotta think of any point less than -1. Gotta think of another point on my graph. What about -2? Plot it into your equation. So -2 plus 1 all squared. Plot it in back into your equation. That's going to give you your y value. I know the parentheses inside -2 plus 1 is a -1. All squared is 1. So that gives me my y value. So notice what I did. I came out with a random x value, one that I could choose from. It has to be less than -1. I plug it into my equation, my result, that's my y value. So that gives me this point. I can come up with more points if I need to, but I'm gonna say this graph looks like a U shape open up. I'm using only the left side, right? From -1 to the left. Now let me take a look. Let me draw a line here. So I'm gonna look at the second equation. All right, so second equation, I'm talking about this one. My x, my highest exponent is 1, right? I expect a line. What I'm going to do, because notice how my x value goes from -1 to 3. So I'm gonna use the smallest number I can use, -1, and I'm gonna use the biggest number that I can use, 3. Those are the values I'm gonna choose for x. Okay, so -1, plug it into your equation, x minus 3. So what I mean with that is, what's -1 minus 3? Right, the x value that you have, use it for x. -1 minus 3 gives me -4. So I found the corresponding y value. Now, on my other point, use the same equation, x minus 3, but for x, we're going to use the value 3. So 3 minus 3 gives me 0. Oop, there you go. That's my corresponding y value. In geometry, so last year, we learned that a line, as long as I have 2 points on the line, I can draw it, right? So here, my first point, -1, -4. That's an open circle, right? The other point is 3, 0. And that's a closed circle, right? I know it's an open circle based on the inequality signs. I have 2 points on that line, so I'm not going to connect them like this. Now, let me take a look at my last equation. So let me draw a line here for my work. My highest exponent is a U shape. So, matter of fact, I expect the vertex to be 4, 0. Do I have that point on my line? Yep. Okay, I have to choose values when x is 3, it's more than 3. So 3 or more, right? Let me still use the value 3 because that's the smallest I can use. I have a point, but let me choose another value here, 5. I came up with values of x. All right, if x equals 3, plot it in. 3 minus 4, it's a -1, all squared. So if x equals 3, I get y equals 1. Now if x equals 5, plot it in. 5 minus 4, all squared. If x equals 5, I get that y is equal to 1 as well. Let me plot this point. My point 3, 1 is an open circle. Let me zoom in here. 3, 1, it's about here. That's an open circle. My point 4, 0, and my point 5, 1. There you go. Now let's take a look at question number 40. Let me take a look at the first thing here. X is going to be 0. Y is going to be 0. Y equals 0. I'm looking at this as with the line y equals 0 when x is less than -4. Okay, when I said earlier, when it is a number, y equals 0, when I mean earlier, I mean here. And it is a number I expect this horizontal line. So I have an idea what to expect, horizontal line. Now, let me come up with points. Let me come up with 2 points. One value I'm going to choose is -4, right? Because x is less -4. -4 is an important number here. Let me choose a number less than -4. All right, let me choose -5. Now here it says y is 0. It doesn't matter what x value you give me, y is 0. So this gives me 2 points, right? I have -4, 0 and -5, 0. I know -4, 0, it's an open circle. Right, I'm using my inequality. -5, 0 is just the point that I found. And I'm gonna connect them. Boom, there you go. Now let me take a look at my second equation now. Let me separate a line. Now this, I'm expecting a V shape. It's either open up or open down. The vertex of this one is 2, 0. Right? For the x value, I change the sign, so it's +2. The y value is the number outside. There's nothing outside, so 0. And let's see. I have to choose from -4 to +1. Now, if x equals -4, plug it in. -4 minus 2 is -6. Absolute value says make it positive. If x equals 1, I get 1 minus 2, -1, make it positive. So let's see. The 0.20, I have that. But let me ask you guys this. The values of x that I can choose are from -4 to 1. I cannot choose that point, right? Because x is 2. It's outside of my range. I'm not gonna choose that point. Now I have the point -4, 6, which is a closed circle. Have the point 1, 1, which is all, this one is a closed circle as well. And I'm just gonna connect them. Now let me do something really quick. This one will look at the 0.20, that's where it switches. So the whole graph would look like that, but I'm only looking at the graph from x from -4 to x +1. That's all I'm looking at. Now the last one, the last equation of this question, let me erase this. I'm looking at this value right here. X is at the bottom. Remember those? I said the value of the graph is trying to approach the x-axis. So let me draw a line. I'm gonna draw, what if x is equal to 1? So that gives me the 0.3/1, which is just 3. So that gives me the 0.13, which is an open circle. And then I said it's trying to approach the x-axis. So it looks like that. Interesting. Now let's take a look at question 41. My first graph, the highest exponent is x squared. So I'm expecting a U shape. Now on this U shape, the vertex, because let me rewrite this as 4 minus the x, let me write it as a parentheses, x minus 0 all squared, right? Because it's the x by itself, so x minus 0 all squared. It gives me the vertex is 0, 4. The x value comes from inside of the parentheses, and the y value comes from this number outside. The negative that I see after the 4 has nothing to do with the 4. So that's why I call it +4. So, okay, that gives me a vertex. I can choose numbers that are 0 or less. So that's a point. Another point that I can choose is, what if x equals -1? Because remember, the values I can choose for x are 0 or less. So then I plug it in. 4, let me do the work here. 4 minus a -1 all squared. I know I have to do exponents first. So 4 minus 1, which is 3. Cool. That's my y value. Let me graph the points that I have already. 0.04, that's an open circle. The point -13, and remember, I'm expecting this to look like a U shape. In this case, it's gonna look like more like you want to be more accurate to the graph, just plot in a few more points. I just plot in 2 points, but you can always plot in more than 2 points. Now let's take a look at the second graph. Absolute value, I expect a V shape. So let me draw a line. My vertex, I expect it to be 0, 0. And then I'm gonna use x equals 0, x equals 4. I already have the first one. So now if x equals 4, let me plug it in. I have a negative absolute value of 4. That gives me that my y value should be negative 4. Okay, let me plot those 2 points. Because the vertex is one of those 2 points, now this thing is only going to look like a line. So I have the point 0, 0, which is an open circle. I have the point negative, I have the point, 4, negative 4, which is also an open circle. In reality, let me take a look. This V shape looks like that. So it does look like a V shape, but I'm only looking at part of the V shape. So that's why I'm only have that. Okay, now let's take a look at the last part here. When x is 4 or more. Now this is a V shape, right? Because it's an absolute value. So it is a V shape. I'm expecting a V shape here. My coordinates are going to be 3, 0. Now, the values of x that I can choose are more than or 4 or more. So guess what? This is not part of my graph. Okay. So I'm only, the vertex is not part of my graph of what I'm going to draw here. So this thing is only going to look like a line, only part of my V shape. All right. So I said values of x I can choose are 4 or more. So I'm going to choose, well, what if x equals 4? What if x equals 5? My equation, remember, it is absolute value of x minus 3. So if I plug in 4, right, because I said x equals 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. The absolute value of 1 is 1. Now, what if I use 5 for x? 5 minus 3 is 2. The absolute value of 2 is 2. So that gives me 2 points on my line. My first point is a closed circle. How do I know it's a closed circle? Because of the inequality sign. My second point, 5, 2, that's just the point. I'm going to connect these. So it looks like that. Let's take a look at my last question for today. Question number 42. An absolute values. I'm expecting a V shape. Inside of the parentheses is 0. Outside of the parentheses, 0. That's my vertex. Now the values that I can choose are negative 3 or less. So I cannot choose that. I can choose values like negative 3 or negative 4. Because the vertex is not part of my graph, right? I cannot include my vertex. My V shape, it's only going to look like a line. So remember, my absolute value is, my question is negative absolute value of x. So I'm looking at negative absolute value of negative 3. Just the absolute value is 3. Because of the negative sign outside, I get negative 3. My equation again is negative absolute value of x. But then I say, well, what if x equals negative 4? So there's a negative outside, absolute value, and negative 4 inside. There's a negative outside of 4. So I have those 2 points. My first point, based on the inequality sign, it's a closed circle. So negative 3, negative 3. The second point, I have -4, which is just the point. Let me connect these. Okay, I'm done with the first equation. Let me take a look at the second part. I'm expecting a U shape, right? Because the highest exponent is x squared. My vertex is 0, -4. Now I'm going to choose x from -3 to +3. So I'm going to choose -3 and +3. Remember, my equation is x squared minus 4. Now, what if x equals -3? That gives me 9 minus 4, which is 5. What if x equals 3? 3 squared is 9 minus 4 is 5. I can choose the x values from -3 to +3. The vertex is 0. The x value is 0. Yeah, that is part of my point here. So let's see. My vertex is just a point. 0, -4 is just a point. My first point, so I'm looking at this point, -3, 5 is an open circle. And I know that based on the inequality sign, -3, 5 is an open circle. Okay, let me graph that. It's right there. My second point, 3, 5. Based on the inequality sign, it's a closed circle. So the point 3, 5, it's a closed circle. So this would look like that. Now my last equation, my last piece. Remember that we call this piecewise because it's 3 pieces. Oop, the x is at the bottom. So remember, when x is at the bottom, it's trying to approach the x-axis. And the values I can choose of x are 3 or more. Okay. So what if I choose the point when x equals 3? What will be my y value? So let me write that as 1 over 3 minus 3. So that gives me 1 over 0. 1 over 0 is undefined. That means it doesn't exist, right? So I'm going to draw at the x equals 3 x's. Let me draw a little dotted line. Because that means, oh, I cannot draw anything there, right? 1 over 0 is undefined. Let me erase that. That doesn't exist, right? Use a calculator, type it in. 1 divided by 0, you're going to see that it doesn't exist. All right, well, what if x equals 4? I need a point. What if x equals 4? So that gives me, and see, 1 over x minus 3 gives me 1 over 4 minus 3, 1 over 1, which is 1. So my y value is 1. I have a point. 4, 1. Now my question is, it's trying to approach the x-axis. Now, because I have the undefined line, it's also trying to approach the undefined line. So we'll look something like that. Gotta do this in pieces. That's why we call this piecewise function.